What's up, everybody? My name is Terry. Today we're going to be doing our last episode of the AE2 tutorial series. Today we're going to be talking about the endgame systems of AE2 and what some of the more advanced computer systems that you need. We'll talk about these big channels, why you don't really need them, but then show you how to make them anyways. As always, if you find these to be helpful, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. It really does help us out. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions for future content. So we're going to hop right into making one of these monstrosities. I'm going to just build up a few blocks so we can see what we're doing. And this is the start of a energy system. So as we know from previous episodes, we always have to give one face away to power. That's the reality of it. Sort of sucks, but it is what it is. But the rest of the build that we're going to do is revolving around a 3x3 cube that has its sort of middle section taken out. So where each face would normally have 9, we have 8 instead, and the middle block is not there. And we do that for every face of a cube and just connect it up like so. So we have one 3x3 cube with every middle block taken out, as well as the very middle of the cube. If I were to remind you of the week that we did P2P, we would know that one other thing that we talk about is that there's no free channels in AE2. And one of the reasons for that is when we do these P2P faces, it saves us time and energy on these big long runs that go throughout our base. But it does cost us channels. And what those channels translate to into this big thing is that it's going to cost us some channels on the inside here. So I'm going to place a few blocks and I'm going to make a comment about this cable. This is our cable that runs through our base and is going to supply power and channels to our P2P faces. And this is a very specific cable. It is the ME Smart Cable Fluix. And the reason I picked this ME Smart Cable Fluix is because regardless of the color of channel that you attach to it, it can attach. So here I have 3 different colors all attached to one cable. There's not an issue. The reason this cable exists is so you can connect multiple colors to one larger cable. We're going to use that plus P2P to create, I don't know, what 60 times 32, I'll do the math later, 60 times 32 faces on this computer system and have more channels available to you than you'll ever really need in a game. So the other thing that we need to pay attention to on P2P is sort of how this inner area here works. A really absolutely awesome function of P2P is that all 4 can fit within one block. And then I can take one smart cable, slap it in there, and since we put this dense smart cable in the center, it's already hooked up, which means we have 4 channels all powered, all coming out to the side here, and we can take this out to 4 times 32, 128 channels that are off on P2P. We could have different rooms and different sections. So each one of these lines out represents 128 channels you can use elsewhere in your base. The other sort of interesting bit of this 3x3 design is that because it has 8 faces on the outside, that means we can have 2 cable runs for each one of these. So 4 channels, 4 channels. The only caveat here is that we need to connect these 4 channels. So each time we build a section of 4 channels, we have to connect it to this main information line that's going through. And it's important that we pull these off in such a way that we balance the power from one side to the other. You don't want to hook up all of these things to one side and overload the 32 channels that are going out of this area right here. I'm sure there's a more efficient way to do this, but as I'll illustrate in a second, there's not really much point because you get just an absolutely silly amount of channels anyways. So as I've said before, each one of these lines off represents 128 channels, and so far we have, what is this, 4 of them? And we just need to power them so it matches. And I'm just going to keep matching and mirroring from side to side so I don't ever overload one side or the other. Each time we come to one of these center faces, remember it uses all of the channels. Just like that. I'll probably trim this video because I think at this point you get the gist of what's really happening here. I've gone ahead and finished every single side of this following that same pattern, making sure that I'm careful to not overload the effective channels. If I can get in here and take a look of the dense cable here. So the dense cable has 14 channels there, and if I can get in here and get a look, it has 23 channels there. Well, we don't have a situation where we have 35 channels on one side and like 12 on the other. So we still have a few effective channels we can use on these big protruding dense cables, and we have powered all of our P2P potential exits for each of these individual lines. So if I can do the math now, it is, each one of these is 128 channels, so 15 times that is 1,920 unique channels, plus or minus 10 that we get from this dense Fluix cable here on the side. That's a lot of channels, and it's probably far more than you'll ever need on a base. As I mentioned in, if I call back to our subnetwork video over here where we did some automation on a subnetwork, as I mentioned here, we can do the cost of 32 channels of work for 2 channels on a system, and that's immensely powerful. So when you're talking about the end of the game where you have these huge AE2 systems, you don't actually need 2,000 channels on your AE2 system. I think at that point you pretty much go for aesthetics, which is what I've set up here. I think this is one of the most aesthetically pleasing ones that I've done in a playthrough. This is the one that Nick, who is a fellow Key Smash member, and I are doing on our current playthrough. I very much like it. I will put a clip of our playthrough right here. This is an example of an in-game AE2 system from our playthrough. As you can see, not many channels are actually used. There's some wiring on the bottom, but for the most part we aren't using that many channels, and that's solely because of the power of subnetworks. You can see that the overall system, really we aren't using that many faces because we use subsystems. I'll put a clip here of one of our subnetworks and see how crazy it is. This is a subnetwork that we use. Obviously this one is a lot more chaotic because we need to use every face on this thing. Each one of these faces is powering 32 machines that are processing ore on and off. As you can see from this one import-output chest, we are going through, let me see if I can hit this thing here. We're going through turning stone into gravel and cobblestone, then turning cobblestone into sand, sand into glass, as well as processing a bit of Cirrus quartz that we come across. On our main network, we have millions of items. See, our highest there stone is almost 5 million. We have millions of items, but we don't need to use 2,000 channels to make this possible. Subnetworks become crazy masses of all these cables, but the main network remains quite clean and sort of aesthetically pleasing. As always, if you have any questions on how any of this works, please let me know down below in the comments section. You can also join our Discord. We have lots of people who know stuff about applied energistics in there, and I'm always in there, and I can lend an ear to a plaguing issue or an idea that you might have. If you have any requests, let me know down below. I'm always happy to do a video on a request. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. It really does help us out, and hopefully we'll see you next week.